All right, so today's lecture is related to Descartes. René Descartes, a very famous, a very influential philosopher, a French philosopher in the 17th century, so the 1600s. He pursued a project. He had this thought experiment. He had this idea about philosophy that really radically changed not only philosophy, but human society itself, the way that humans interact with the world, the way that humans think about the world. He is, by many, considered one of the founding fathers, if not the founding father of modernity. And we now are in a different era of human history, but modernity directly preceded the one that we're in right now. And so he is pivotal to that, to defining kind of the key principles and the key values that are a part of this particular aspect of human history. And it moves on from the medieval periods. The medieval period was the one directly preceding it, and the medieval period was one defined by religion and defined by faith, faith-seeking understanding. So the thinkers in that era were very much trying to, they begin with faith and they try to figure out, what can we know about faith? In what ways is it rational? In what ways is our reason limited? Okay, so you have that kind of as a background, and Descartes puts this all into question, and again, is a radical transformation. So what is he doing? Well, he begins from a position of distrust. Again, he's moving. You got to think about this. He's moving from a period in human history of faith, where we assume faith, where we believe that there is some kind of all-good, all-loving creator, and then we're just trying to figure out, okay, what can we know about that creator in the world that God created? With Descartes, and the reason he's the founding father of modernity, is we begin with doubt, we begin with distrust. We don't take for granted, we don't begin with faith. And so he looks at the past, and he sees it as plagued with errors. Everything that I once believed, he now has to put into question. And he wants to demolish everything in the past. He wants to start fresh. This idea of starting from scratch in order to begin to know, in order to come to some level of certainty. And so you might think about it as someone who's very passionate about a particular field. Somebody who's very passionate about music would devote themselves to music. Somebody who's passionate about sports will devote themselves to sports. Somebody who's passionate about their studies will devote themselves to their studies. Descartes was passionate about this question of what does it mean to know? And that is the section of the course that we find ourselves in right now. And he is absolutely pivotal to that question. So what can we know? Can we know anything with certainty? That is the fundamental question that he's going to ask himself. That's why he begins these meditations, which again is a kind of a philosophic project, thought experiment, idea. Okay, so it begins with this individual decision, where he says, look, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to put everything to the side. He's in this cabin in France, and he's going to say, I'm not going to worry about anything else. I'm just going to start my project of doubting everything. And he realizes that he himself, not only has there been errors in the past, he himself has been in error. So it's unlike, for example, Plato's cave, where you're forced out, where you cannot recognize your own error. For Descartes, he is someone who realizes that he's in error, and he makes the decision as an individual to kind of proactively try to correct this error. And he withdraws into this place of solitude, peace, tranquility. So it's a knowledge that is going to be gained not from interaction with the world, or from prayer, or from solitude or anything like that. It is going to be from this place where he's just thinking for himself. Okay. And it's certainly not an opinion-based philosophy. He's certainly not saying, look, everybody's opinions are irrelevant and everybody's opinions count. He wants to know something for certainty. Now, what is his methodology? How is he going to go about radically doubting? So this is what he wants to do. He wants to radically doubt by doubting everything that is uncertain. And that is his method. He's not going to say, look, I've got to prove something is false in order to doubt it. All I have to have is the slightest reason to doubt that what I think is true is in fact true. I just have to have the slightest reason to think, you know what, maybe this thing that I thought was the way the world worked is not in fact the way the world works. Again, you don't have to prove that this idea that you're doubting is wrong. You just have to have a reason to doubt it. And it's not even kind of a reasonable doubt in a certainly legal sense. Just any little doubt is enough to say, look, that cannot count as certain knowledge, because that's what he wants. He wants absolute certainty. And if you're going to get to absolute certainty, if you're going to come to the point of knowing something without any doubt whatsoever, without even the possibility of doubting it, you do have to introduce this idea of, well, if there's any little bit of doubt, reason to think that it might not be true, then I can't take it for certainty. Again, it's this idea, we're not starting in faith, not a faith-seeking understanding, but the decision to distrust is what is central. And that's what's really key here. I mean, think about that modernity begins with this basic distrust of the world. And it's got to investigate the world to try to figure out, okay, what can be known with certainty? And that is a much different perspective that human beings have taken in that period versus the previous period. And doubt, in that sense, is a tool. It's a way to get to certainty. It's not the end goal for Descartes, but it is a way to get to certainty. And what he's going to do, in returning to the methodology a little bit, he's not going to doubt individual kind of decisions. He's not going to doubt whether he sees a bird in the sky. What he's going to doubt, what he's going to try to doubt, is the very foundations of these knowledge. So instead of doubting whether that bird is up there in the sky, he wants to know if he can trust sense knowledge at all. And this is where he begins. He begins with sensory knowledge. And he says, look, surely, and if I quote here from the reading, surely whatever I had admitted until now as most true I received either from the senses or through the senses. So he's saying, look, whatever I thought was the most true, was the most indubitable, which is undoubted, or the inability to doubt, comes from the senses. I see something right in front of me. How can I doubt that? That seems absolutely true. I see, for example, in my study here, a green wall. How can I doubt that that is true? I see a camera right in front of me. How can I doubt that that is true? Okay, so there's a certain immediacy about the senses. It's right there. It's in my face. It's not something, that I'm manipulating in any way. That seems to give sense knowledge and sensory experience the status of certainty. But he says, look, senses are deceptive. And when you think a little bit more deeply, it's not true that what I get from the senses is always accurate. And it is a mark, he says, of prudence to never trust to never place our trust in anything that has deceived us even once. Okay, so, how does he go about doubting sensations and sensory experience? Well, he says, maybe immediately right in front of you seems absolutely certain, but look a little further. Look out your window. Look out a classroom window one day when you're at Newman. Are you sure that outside there is a squirrel running around, or that there's a red car driving by? Perhaps that car simply seems to be red, based on the sunlight or something like that. But then when you get down there, it's actually black, or it's actually blue. And he says, look, we've all had experiences of optical illusions. You place a pencil in a cup of water, for example, it looks like it's broken. It looks like it's completely bent. That is not, in fact, the case. So his point here is, look, sensations, sensory experiences, not always going to give us accurate information. Think about how magicians are able to trick our senses and make us think something that is not in fact the case. Think about when you're sick. For example, you may feel like it is absolutely stifling in the room that you're in, whereas the temperature is put to a very cool temperature. Okay, so he says again, when I have any reason to doubt sensations, well, then I've got to doubt them all. So there you go. There are sensations out the window. At least in terms of kind of things from afar. But then he goes, okay, well, what about the immediate? This very, again, this camera right in front of me. Feel your hand. You know, is there any way you could doubt that you're in fact feeling your hand right now? Feel your hair. Is there any way you can doubt that you're actually feeling your hair? And he says, all right, well, here are my options here. Well, one, I could be insane. You know, I could think I'm feeling my hand when in fact I'm not. It's just a complete and utter delusion. But, you know, and maybe you could say, look, I'm not in the classroom right now, or I'm not watching this video on my computer, but I'm really in a jungle. You know, I'm underwater in a sea cabin or something like that. And so you could be insane, but he says, all right, well, we can't take insanity as the way to doubt, because those people, in fact, are insane. Even if there was something certain and true, they wouldn't be able to identify it. So he says, all right, you know, I can't make this, I can't doubt the very immediate and direct sensations on the basis of insanity, but he does then go on to say, well, what about dreaming? Have you ever had a dream? You know, and I ask you as the audience right here, have you ever had a dream that feels absolutely real? It feels like it's happening. It feels like you're in your real life, and then you wake up from the dream and you're like, holy moly, what was that? You know, I thought that was real. I wasn't sure. You know, people wake up in night terrors all the time because they think what they're experiencing is real. So he says, all right, I feel this hand in front of me, but do I know that it's the hand of me in a wakeful state? Maybe I'm just dreaming that I'm feeling my hand, when in fact I am sleeping here completely comfortably, not touching my hand at all. Can I know with absolute certainty that I am in fact not dreaming right now? Can you know with absolute certainty that you are not simply dreaming about this video? And he says, well, I don't think I can. Because there have been dreams, there have been times where the dream seems absolutely realistic. And, you know, after the fact you can say, well, that was a dream, but not when you're in it. And perhaps right now what you're experiencing is in fact a dream. Can you know with 100% certainty that you're not dreaming? And Descartes' methodology says if you can't know with 100% certainty, well, that's a reason to doubt the sensory experiences that you're feeling right now are in fact real sensory experiences that are coming from objects outside of your body, outside of your mind. Okay, so his conclusion here is there's no definitive distinction and difference between dreaming and waking. Okay, so we can doubt that what we're experiencing now is real. Perhaps it is a fantasy, perhaps it is an illusion of a dream. But can we doubt the very kind of basic foundations of a sense experience? For example, colors, shapes. You know, is there any way to say, look, those things are not true? And so we could doubt maybe, you know, sciences dealing with things like physics, astronomy, medicine, because they deal with bodies, and perhaps, you know, we don't know exactly the effects of these studies. We don't know if they are, again, dreams. But can we doubt those types of knowledge bases and studies that deal with just the very foundational, very basic truths of reality? Can we doubt, for example, that 2 plus 3 equals 5, or 2 plus 2 equals 4, or that a square has 4 sides? You know, and these seem like these basic propositions, these mathematical axioms, for example, they seem like they're the type of thing that can't be doubted. That you can doubt whether you're awake right now, but whether you're dreaming or waking isn't 2 plus 2, 4, no matter what. And he asks, is there any way to doubt these very basic truths? Because if not, then Descartes has what he's looking for. He's found a foundation, something that is absolutely certain, and then he can build from there. Okay, so he says, well, can I doubt? Is there any way to doubt? He says, all right. Well, you know, I believe in a God. I believe in a all-good, all-loving God. And I've been taught that from my youth, that there is a God who has created the world, who loves the world, who knows everything, who is all good. But he says, look, you know, tradition, that's a bad basis to look for certainty. Because in my tradition, Descartes, I'm speaking to Descartes here, there's been lots of things that they've thought were true that turned out not to be true. You just think the world, people used to think was flat. And now we know that it's round. And so things that were assumed in your tradition don't turn out necessarily to end up being true. And so if his idea of God is based on tradition, he has to say, well, I can't know for certain that this God exists. Again, know that this God is good. And again, we get the sense that, look, we're not starting with faith here. But then he also asks, look, if there really is this good God, so I can reject this good God based on tradition, not being certain of my tradition. But I can also say, look, if there really is an all-good God, then why have I ever been deceived? Usually this is the question of evil put into epistemological terms. Epistemology means the study of knowledge. And so, often theologians have asked, well, can there be a good, all-powerful, all-loving God if in fact there's evil, suffering, human misery? So here, Descartes is asking it from the perspective of knowledge. He's saying, look, can I know for certain that there's an all-good, all-loving, all-wise God if I've been in error? If there are things that I thought were true that turn out not to be? He says, no. There's another reason to doubt that such a God exists. And if I can in any way doubt it, I have to assume that it's not true. But then he takes it a step further. And this is kind of the really interesting thing. He talks about the evil genius. He says, well, maybe there's not an all-good, all-loving God. In fact, maybe there's an evil genius, a being with absolute power, near absolute power, a devil, instead of a God, a devil that runs the universe. And perhaps this devil enjoys nothing other than messing with my mind, making me think things that I thought are true that are not in fact true. Maybe this evil genius, as he calls it, loves to see me in error, loves to play with me. And so, this thing, this 2 + 2 that I thought was 4, maybe that's just the evil genius manipulating me, tricking me, making me think that this is absolutely certain when it in fact is not. Everything that I could possibly know is wrong. We're going to look at this next week with the idea of the matrix, but perhaps, instead of the dreaming idea, perhaps we're all in a computer-generated reality run by a really malicious computer programmer that enjoys creating a program that feels so real, that we think it is true, that we think it's real, that we think we're actually out there in the world. But, in fact, we're not. We're inside a computer program. And this computer program can make us believe anything that it wants us to believe, and can manipulate us into believing that what we think we know for certain is true, when it in fact is not. And so there you have this idea, this radical doubt. That's how he gets to the point of doubting even the most basic truths. He says, perhaps there is not a good God, but an evil genius that runs the universe, manipulates me, tricks me, is constantly deceiving me, and, and again, enjoys the fact that I am making error. And so here, if there's going to be certainty, if Descartes is going to find some piece of knowledge that cannot be doubted, it's got to be strong enough. It's got to be so certain that even if there was an evil genius, even if there was an all-powerful computer programmer, that evil genius, that evil God, that devil, or that computer programmer, you couldn't doubt this piece of knowledge even with that kind of person running the universe. So he's looking for a piece of knowledge that is so certain that you can't doubt it, even if an evil genius exists. And that's what he's going to try to do. That's what he's going to try to find in the second meditation. So he ends the first meditation in the state of complete doubt, uncertainty, confusion. And he says, I don't know if I'm ever going to make it out of here. I don't know if I'm ever going to find something that is 100% true, 100% certain. And it's important to note, he's not saying, look, take this doubt and then go out and live it out in your life. He's not saying, well, perhaps that window out there, perhaps I'm a bird, and I jump out that window and I'll start flying. Perhaps that bus is just a hologram and I'll step in front of it. He says, look, don't actually put this into practice because, most likely that world out there is real. He's not saying there's a good reason to doubt that the outer world or sensory experience exists or that 2 + 2 = 4. He said, no, it's almost certain that what's out there and what we experience is true, is real. But he wants something more. He wants absolute certainty. He doesn't want to just simply say, well, of course it's a real world outside me because that's what it seems like, that's what I experience, that's what I've always been taught. He wants to know for certain that that real world exists, that there's something outside of his own mind. And that's the state of confusion that he ends the first meditation with, saying, look, I don't know And I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to find certainty. I don't know if I'm ever going to find something so 100% true that not even evil genius could trick me about it. And the meditation, too, he continues on his journey.